Hi there, welcome to Floating in Dreams. Today's video is going to be my eyeshadow palette ranking for 2023. Welcome to everybody watching today. Thank you so very much for joining me. This video is going to be my eyeshadow palette ranking for the new year. These are all of the palettes I tried in 2023, and I tried a lot. Leave a comment down below if you want to guess how many eyeshadow palettes I tried, because there were more here than I had expected personally. So let me know in a comment down below what you think I tried. And in case you're new here, you've never seen one of my videos, my name is Maaike. I live in the Netherlands. I have fair skin with a cool neutral undertone, and this greatly influences how I feel about makeup. And that also goes into my eyeshadow palette ranking, of course. I have been reviewing makeup for more than a decade. Love eyeshadow palettes, essence and Catrice, and getting the use out of my makeup. So if that's something you're also interested in, I would love for you to subscribe. So I have tried, drumroll please, 86 eyeshadow palettes in 2023. I was a bit stumped by that number because in my brain, there was a part of my brain thinking I had tried fewer than I did last year. And I tried around the same amount last year, actually. I set myself the task of not only reviewing new palettes, because in previous years, I was reviewing close to, I think, 120 palettes a year, and it just got a bit much. And I just wanted to make sure I had space in my monthly review periods where I could also go back to older palettes. So that's definitely where the wish to have fewer new palettes coming in, where that came from. However, there were a lot of small palettes this year. So I think that's why in my brain it feels like there was less eyeshadow, because I just tried a lot of smaller bits, you could say. Not these like gigantic palettes. I tried a few, but not too many. Like a lot of it was under 12 pans. A lot of it was like a 9 pan or less. And you'll see that I'm really into my small palettes at the minute. If you've already watched my end of year favorites video, then you kind of already know what palettes might show up in the top 15 of this ranking today, but I have tried many more. So let me just get to it, because 86 palettes, that's a lot to get through. And this is my second time filming this video because I had a bit of a corrupted file moment where my camera cut out in the middle of filming. So I'm going to have a close eye on my battery, whether it's not running too low, because that's what happened the other day. And the only thing I still had was the beginning of that video and the ending of that video. And the middle part, it was just gone. So I'm sitting down to film this video once more. So here we go. It's going to be a long one. So get comfy, grab a cup of tea, wine, prosecco, whatever it is that floats your boat. Make sure you're comfortable, because this is going to be a long one. So before we get to the actual palettes that I have lying in front of me, I have to mention two palettes that I no longer even own. And I was like, if I've already decluttered them at this point, they have to be at the very bottom of the ranking. The first one, so number 86, I'm going to lose count. So I'm going to sort of stick to like the 10 or so palettes, and then like the numbers I'll try and pop on the screen. But number 86 would be my Essence Welcome to Marrakesh. The Essence Travel series, as I like to call them, have had some nice quality eyeshadow, especially for the price point. But the color stories are always a little bit lacking, which is why I got rid of this one. It was just warm tones with a pop of purple. I'll make sure to pop a picture up on the screen so you can have a look. So yeah, for me personally, the entire sort of Essence Travel makeup line hadn't been very successful until later this year, because the Marrakesh palette was a spring release. Their fall release, on the other hand, I did really enjoy. So I do like the formula, but there's just something about a lot of these Essence Travel palettes that's just a bit nah. And that's why this one ended up being decluttered. And the other one I've already decluttered. I think I may still have it somewhere. But only because I was collecting the entire set, which was the Catrice Pro Slim in Blushing Ocean. I have all of these palettes, and I was keeping them around because Catrice for a while there did one or two of these every single rendition they did. So it was helpful for me as a creator to have all of them. But this Blushing Ocean one was a bit, again, warm toned with a pop of blue. It looked okay. It was pretty decent quality. It just wasn't my favorite color story, and I kind of only have it somewhere in a box. But now that they seem to have discontinued this entire line, I just know that it's time for me to get rid of all of these, say for the 1 or 2 color stories that I've had in my makeup collection for a while that I truly appreciate because they were something new that no other brand really offers. But a lot of these Pro Slim palettes were inspired by Huda Beauty palettes or like other things that were going on in the market already. So it wasn't that exciting, I have to say. And then we get to the palettes that I actually have physically. So 84 and 83, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but it's these guys from Odin's Eye. And not because I don't like Odin's Eye. Up until this point, up until me buying these palettes, I have loved every single Odin's Eye palette I ever bought. But I just found that there was just a little bit of like shimmer quality lacking here. I like the mattes okay, but they were also a bit patchy, and these palettes made me develop a theory that Odin's Eye may have a batch problem. There are good batches of Odin's Eye palettes and people love them, and there are bad batches, and I happen to get a bad batch for both of these. I bought these, I think, in a 2nd or 3rd restock of these. I'm not sure how many they did, but I did buy them at the end of 2022, and they were re-released for 2023. So the Merry Christmas palette, gorgeous color story. This is why I wanted to own this. This is the more warm-toned one. And then there's also the more cool tone one in the Merry Christmas palette. So this is what the Merry Christmas palette looks like. It's a gorgeous looking color story, and I wish I loved these more. I have put these on the list to try them again in January to see if I still feel the same now that I've had like a year between me trying them for the first time and really seeing if I still feel the same way. And then the bottom part of the 80s, so 82 and 81, are going to be some drugstore things by Makeup Revolution and Kruidvat. Makeup Revolution Zodiac Air. I bought this because I thought the color story looked really great, but this was chalky. It was a very chalky mess, so I didn't love it for that reason, which is why the Zodiac palette had to be at the bottom of this ranking. And I felt similarly about the Kruidvat Sky Like This eyeshadow palette. Ooh, oh no! What happened here? It broke. So now it's also broken. Not sure why that happened, because I tend to be very careful with my eyeshadow palettes, but oh well. This was also quite chalky, and so many of these shades, like these 2 blues, exactly the same. Some of these darker shades, exactly the same. The only row I sort of liked were these ones. And those were okay. It's definitely nothing to write home about in terms of eyeshadow quality. So then we're going down from 80 towards 70, 71-ish. So number 80, if you've seen my worst makeup of the year, you knew that this would be coming. This is the Viseart Petite Matte Cool. This is a color story I had on my wish list for such a long time, ever since they only did those larger palettes. Remember the one with the clear lids? Back when they only did the Pro palettes, and they now do them in these mini versions, which I thought, okay, these are half the price of those. I think I'm going to love these. I have a bunch of Viseart palettes with the same pan size. So I was thinking, even if I don't love this palette, because I'm not an all matte palette kind of gal, I figured that I could use some of these shades to rope into my other palettes. And that's the only way I'm going to see myself getting use out of this. I found out that everything that is like this part of the palette all looked the same on me. The blues turned gray, the purples turned gray. So for me, it was just too gray heavy in the end. It just didn't really look like purples and blues, and you couldn't really see much of a difference whether I had used the gray or those other colors. So as a companion palette for some of my other Viseart palettes, for sure, this can still work. This is not going anywhere. I'm not going to declutter this. But in terms of what I want to get out of a color story, an eyeshadow palette overall, this didn't quite live up to my expectations. Another palette that wasn't that successful for me is the Wake Make, and I need to read this from the back, Mix Blurring Eye Palette in Forest Brown. I tried a bunch of K-Beauty this year, and some of it I loved, and it ended up being one of my favorite things of the entire year. But there were also a couple of things that didn't quite work for me. And as lovely as this is, like this has such a lovely color story with these like cooler tone, more neutral leaning browns, some really interesting shimmers. Like, I'm not sure if you can see, but this white, maybe if it catches the light a little bit. This white has like stars in it. It's super cute, but everything I can do with this ends up looking the same. And a lot of people have been telling me, like, yeah, you can like perhaps use this complexion product to pull in as eyeshadow. But these shades are exactly what you already get in this palette, so it doesn't add anything. So that's why the Wake Make, as much as I do enjoy the formula, it was a bit too light and a little bit, like, I do like a wash of color, as we'll see further on in this video, but this was pushing it for me. Like, this was pushing it into the other side of the, like, direction of what a wash of color can also be. And then the majority of the 80 to 70 category is taken up by my Alter Ego palette. So these were sent to me in PR by the brand. They asked me to try it, and I put these in my worst makeup of 2023 list because so many people make it out to be that these palettes are like the best thing since sliced bread, and that these are like the same as Natasha Denona, Huda Beauty, and ABH, but at a much more affordable price point. And that's the only thing I had ever heard of these. And I find, because I have all the original palettes to these, I could do the comparative swatches. I could feel these shadows side by side, and I just feel they didn't really live up to that. Granted, if you're on a budget and you enjoy these color stories and you don't want to shell out the money, these might be worth it if you're in the US. If you're in the EU, wait for a sale on any of the original palettes and you will end up spending as much money. That's just the way I feel. So, because of course Alter Ego is in the US, so you would then get shipping and handling fees that are added to it. So the Goddess is a dupe for the Natasha Denona Gold, which is one of my all-time favorite palettes. And this is the one where I just realized, like, this is not going to work for me. I only did one look with that palette because I was just so done with this formula by the time I had tried all three of these. The Coastal is the Huda Beauty Rose Quartz, another one of my all-time favorites. And this, again, some of the undertones in this, where the Huda Beauty tends to be like very cool toned on me, and very sort of like these pinks are very pink, these almost look peach. It wasn't a good look. And then my favorite of the three that I tried is the Midsummer, and this is why they sent me the PR, because this was their latest launch at the time. And I do enjoy the color story. This made me realize how much I like the ABH color story, and I actually prefer this layout over the ABH one, and this was the better one of the three, I figured. Like, this came closest to what the ABH has to offer, but I just feel that the mica and the shimmer in the ABH is just a little bit more sophisticated than this is. You can just tell that it's cheaper makeup. That's how I would categorize it. Speaking of cheaper makeup, the Rival Hearts Me Out of Space eyeshadow palette. This thing, I mean, she's pretty. I mean, look at that, like, sort of silvery packaging. This retails for like less than €4 at the German drugstore. I picked it up when I was in Germany, and I had already tried these palettes before, and this has confirmed it yet again to me. Like, some really stunning shades, but a little bit chalky. Again, if you're in a pinch or if you just don't want to spend a lot of money on makeup, this is still pretty okay in my book. Like, it's not bad makeup at all. Like, it's not like the Zodiac palette from Makeup Revolution or the Kruidvat thing that I showed you already. This is pretty decent considering the price point. It's really not that terrible. And you get 18 shades. So if you're a beginner with makeup, the only thing you have to be very careful with is how you build these up, because they can dust away into nothing. And then rounding up the 80 to 70 countdown is the Bibia Tea House palette. This is their final shadow palette in Meringue. And this, like the Wake Make, I was super excited for this one because I thought it was going to be very pretty. But here again, like with the Wake Make, I end up just getting one look out of it. It's got 8 shades, but you couldn't tell that you've used more than one shade when you use this. It does have a deeper shade, so it looks. It doesn't have enough pigment to it to really contrast anything, and it only has one shimmer, so I appreciate I was able to try this palette. It's definitely, in terms of like K-Beauty, it's another palette that I'm glad I got to try, but it wasn't quite for me. Then we have this guy, the Catrice Meta Face palette. This was their fall release in, I think, October-ish, limited edition. And since I had such great luck with the falling colors that they did last year, I was thinking, right, Catrice can do a really good fall color story. I'm going to try this because it looks really pretty. It has that Y2K sort of vibe to it. But the issue with this palette is that it doesn't have enough midtones to really bring the look together. There is a cream here, and I don't love having creams and powders in the same palette. I just don't. And then you have the pink, the green, and the purple, which are so light and pastel leaning that you can't really use them in the crease with a fluffy brush. Like packed on all over the lid, they are really pretty, but they just sheer out a bit too much. The highlights are definitely like these two shimmers and some of the shimmers here on the end. Those were lovely. And I do really appreciate shimmers, but I do want them to have something to work with in the rest of the palette. And even though I did like the looks that came out of this, it was still a bit disappointing to me. Another palette I already showed you, my worst makeup of the year. This is the V90s palette. I know, I'm sounding like a broken record here. I had already spotted this in Harrods before buying this. And I had swatched it and it looked pretty and it was cool toned and it was like, yes, I'm gonna love it. Here's the thing. This pools a lot darker on my lids with brushes than what it looks like in the pan or even in a swatch. And the shimmers, we get 3 shimmers here, here, and here, and they are incredibly weak. They're just not really good, impactful shimmers. And everything I did with this was so glam. It just, for how expensive this is and how much I had been craving this, it was just a little too much of a disappointment. And then we have the final palette in this little section. This is the Minka from Adept, another palette I have already showed you in my worst makeup video. And this is one that was disappointing to me because at the end of 2022, I put an Adept palette, the Ninhydrin, in my end of year favorites as one of the best palettes I had tried in 2022. So when this released, I was super stoked. I was like, I'm gonna love this. I love the Adept formula. And then they changed the formula. Between the Ninhydrin and the Minka, they did something completely different with their shimmers, and these do not work with brushes. I don't love it if a shimmer doesn't work with a brush. If I can only use it applying fingers, I do not have the blendability, I don't have the versatility, I have hooded deep set eyes, I need to be able to blend something. This doesn't blend. So for me, a bit like the Viseart really, where I just get so many stunning shades, like the shades individually I really, really enjoy, but this poured sort of very creamy shimmer texture that we also found in the Major Dimension 2 from Patrick Ta that I also didn't like in 2022. I just know this is just not my vibe. This is just not my thing, which is why the Minka palette by Adept has to be in the lower part of this ranking. If I'm not mistaken, we're now going down from 70 to 60, and we're kicking off the 60s with, or number 70, I should say, with Kiko Milano. This is the soft nude eyeshadow palette in shade 1. This was a gift from a friend saying like, hey, you love cool tones, maybe you'll like this. And I always harp on about Kiko Milano not having great eyeshadow palettes because I don't love their color story. And there's going to be 2 Kiko eyeshadow palettes in this part of the ranking. The soft nude was very reminiscent to me of the La Palette nudes that L'Oreal did a couple of years ago. Does anybody remember those? It's got the same sort of like satiny formula. Nothing here is super shimmery, and for how many shades we get, it's so incredibly light. So many of these shades could just be interchanged, and there's really no rhyme or reason to it. I did do a really pretty look using this palette and pulling in one of my Lisa Eldridge liquid eyeshadows. That was stunning, but this is just not a standalone palette. Next up, number 69 is the NYX Ultimate Utopia. This was a palette I bought for a full face of NYX that I did in 2023. And I have been wanting to try this because NYX can do some really good eyeshadow. I started my makeup journey with a lot of NYX singles. That's just something I used to do. So I still hold NYX very near and dear to my heart. And then I saw Erica Conger here on YouTube using this palette in one of her videos. I was like, she's stunning. I should just try it. And then I tried it, and there's just not enough like depth to really sort of deepen things up. It's a lot of midtones. And the shimmers in here aren't the best either. So for me, NYX Ultimate Utopia wasn't quite it. And I'm putting my other Odin's Eye palette I tried this year also slightly towards the bottom part of this ranking. This is something that I realized as I was filming this video the first time, is that in terms of the palettes I tried a lot I didn't enjoy. And then there were a lot of palettes that I did enjoy, but the middle ground, like the things where I'm like, yeah, that's okay, that wasn't that big of a section. So we're very much going from things I really didn't enjoy to things that I really, really enjoyed in a minute. So already around like the 40 level mark. I tried a lot of really good palettes this year. But yeah, the Jewels and Gems, as much as I love this color story, it just pains me. This is why I keep being interested in Odin's Eye, because their color stories are just next level. Like if you want an M-top neutral, Odin's Eye is your jam, you know, that's where you'll find the good stuff. But for me, same problem here as with some of the Christmas palettes. The shimmers just didn't really do it for me. The mattes in here was stunning. No problem here with the mattes. With the Christmas palettes, I also felt the mattes were a little bit patchy. With this, the mattes were absolutely insane, really nicely pigmented, really nice and blendable formula as well. But the shimmers in here were no bueno. And then we have the Kiko Milano Joyful Holiday Christmas thing, green as hope. Bought this for a full face of Kiko. It's greens with a gold. How revolutionary. This is what I mean with Kiko just not doing great eyeshadow palettes. The quality in this was okay, but I just prefer their singles. If you want to try Kiko eyeshadow, their water eyeshadows, their eyeshadow sticks, their cream eyeshadows, like anything that's not in a palette from Kiko is so much better than what they have on offer in their eyeshadow palettes. I sound like a broken record at this point, but that's really how I feel. And another thing that was sent to me by a brand, this is Florasis. This is their Goddess palette. It's shaped like a fan, and this is just too pretty to use. I love these Chinese brands for how well they execute their packaging. Like, look at how gorgeous she is. Oh, I love this palette just for the looks. But every single time you stick your brush into these, a little bit of the picture that it makes actually is starting to fade away. And I think if you know anything about what I like, you can guess why this is so low down. It's warm toned. It's got 3 oranges and bronzy browns. Like there's a cooler tone brown on this end, and this is also like this is a little bit more mustard leaning, so those I liked. We get a blue brown shade that I can get down with, and I quite enjoy this champagne. But this entire like gold peach section, nope, not my vibe, which is the only reason why it's ranked this low. The quality was actually pretty good. It's just not my kind of color story. Speaking of things not really being my kind of color story, Essence, these little palettes, the Trust Your Intuition and Protect Your Energy. They have these little doors. This is very orange heavy, not my vibe. And this one is a little bit more of a green color story, but again with that orange, not my vibe. And then speaking of not really being my vibe, but I had not expected it to be because I bought this to be a companion palette, and it's the Petit Four Lavande from Viseart. So this is one of their 4-pan palettes, and I got this to make the Violette Étendue a little bit more purple. And it's a really pretty palette. It is stunning. It's the quality from Viseart that I know I love. No issues with this showing up. These looked okay. They looked very vibrant, but I just knew that this would be something I would want to compare, like use together with my Violette Étendue. That's something I think I want to do this spring, to really use them together. And then something again that was K-Beauty and a little bit disappointing is this guy. This is the Kaja bento box in rose water. It comes with 3 shades. It clicks open like this, and then we have this very light shade. This is my favorite one because it's super shimmery and shiny, and then we have this darker shade. It's 3 shimmers. Is it pretty? Is it nice quality eyeshadow? Yes, but I just want a little bit more versatility with my palettes. This is again not a standalone, but the way K-Beauty shadows work, I know I have now plenty of K-Beauty eyeshadow palettes that I can use and then use this in conjunction. Like I can make it work. So this is not going anywhere if I were to declutter my makeup collection. It's just a little bit limiting on what it can do. And finally, in this section, so we're now at 71, is the 3CE. This is their multi-eye color palette in Plot Twist. First of all, on the website, this looked like it was going to be green toned, like browns with a green undertone. It wasn't. Turns out to be mustardy browns with bronzes. So in terms of like color story, this wasn't going to be my vibe, but for how expensive it is, this is just as much as like a Huda Beauty 9-pan. It's like 33 euros. We get 2 shades that are essentially the same thing. These 2 do essentially the same thing in a 9-pan. I just want a little bit more Was the quality okay? Yes, but for the color story and the fact that we have 9 shades, of which a couple of them are exactly the same, and me having found eyeshadow palettes that try to dupe this within the K-beauty realm that are half the price that I like just as much, those are going to be ranked a little bit higher. So I said it was 71, it's actually 61, because now we're going from 60 to 50. And in here, I have the green version of the Catrice. This is the Cozy Earth that Catrice that came out with this fall, and this is just like those Essence palettes. It promises you to give you a green color story because there are 2 pans that are quite big that are green, but if you take the greens out, you can just see that is actually a warm tone neutral palette with 2 golds, which I didn't need. And all of these little Catrice palettes that I have tried, when you stick your fingers in or a brush, you get these like discoloration marks. I don't know why, but to me that kind of makes me nervous, as if these are not going to keep very well, as if the oils of your fingers and like the fact that you've used brushes on your lids, that it's just going to disrupt the eyeshadow, makes me a little bit nervous about these ones. So that's why it's ranked quite low. Another thing that's ranked quite low is the Viseart London Étoile. I love the packaging of these Étoile palettes. Look at that. She's so stunning. The London one ended up being my least favorite of these Étoile palettes that came out in 2022. It's just, there are shades in here that I like. Like I really like this grungy, sort of greeny gold. I do like the 2 purpley things in here, but the yellow tone gold kind of throws it off for me. I mean, it's okay. I like it enough, but I wish it had a little bit more variation. And Viseart insists on putting like a matte cream in all of these Étoile palettes, which I also didn't need. However, I just feel that if I cover up this like really brassy gold looking thing, and I were to perhaps put something from the Cool Mattes in here, I might still like it because I do like the purpley shades we get. But that one was a little less successful. Love the formula. Color story wise, it wasn't quite it. I just told you that I had found cheaper alternatives to the 3CE that are half the price point, but that essentially do the same thing in more neutral color stories, and they are these 2 guys from Holika Holika. This is the My Fave Mood Eye Palette in Neat Knit and Button Up. That's what these 2 are called, and you can see where they got the inspiration from, because Neat Knit has like a cable knit sort of design to it, and then Button Up, let me open it up, has button embossings. And I thought I was going to like this darker one more than I did this one, but when I was using it, I just felt that the darker background of this kind of threw it off, and I ended up liking this one just a little bit better. But both of these really only have like 1 shimmer in the middle, and it's not that much of a shimmer. Like, it's nothing to write home about, and to be quite fair, they are just a little bit too similar in terms of what they can do. So I thought they were going to be like a darker version and a lighter version, that I could like use them combined once I used them separately. Didn't really quite work out that way for me. So yeah, these Holika Holika ones, very similar formula to the 3CE, which is why I rank them around the same level. I have tried other K-beauty palettes that are going to end up in my top 20. You already know this if you've seen my end of year favorites. And another palette that I just didn't love the color story of, but where I did really enjoy the formula, that's sort of like the section where we're in right now. Like, these were good shadows, but the color stories were always a little off for me. Like, they're still pretty, I can still make it work, it's okay. But the Sydney Grace Sweet Indulgence, this was a gift from a friend, was not just this just isn't something I would pick up myself, right? It's like warm toned, pinky. And here again, I feel that the pink background of this palette really throws it off, because these browns are far more neutral than they look like in the pan. I just thought, like, the teal I love and everything else, nah. But this peachy tone was pretty nice. The mustard was nice. This is like a row of like mauve tones. So it is a pretty palette. I can definitely make it work. It is the Sydney Grace formula that I know I love. If there's just something about this that makes me not think of this. So this is one where I do think if I'm decluttering my makeup at the start of 2024 in like March time, I may have to pull this apart, because this is magnetized, and I'm just going to add these to my singles collection and get the use out of it that way. But palette wise, it doesn't really quite come together for me. And then the ColourPop of Melrose palette. This was a palette that I had put in my shopping cart on ColourPop, taken it out, put it back in, taken it out, and I never was quite like biting the bullet on this one. And ColourPop was describing this as a cool tone color story. ColourPop, are we serious? This is not cool toned. It's neutral with warm tones and cool tones. Like this section here, this is incredibly warm toned. This is a little bit more cool toned, and then here we get some like neutrally things. I like this shade. I love these three. The rest of the palette I found was a bit superfluous. I do quite enjoy the copper, so this is another one that I'm probably going to rearrange. It is a ColourPop formula that I know I like, but not all the shades in here are the kind of shades I would reach for. Then another K-Beauty palette that I did really enjoy, but again, quite limiting, but here we already get a little bit more contrast. It's the Peri Para Fall in Acorn eyeshadow palette. Dressed in Mood Fall in Acorn. It's just a very weird long shape, which I don't really love. It's got a putty shade, so again, creams with powders in one palette, and then we only get really one shimmer in here as well. But this does have a really nice gradient. You can pull one really stunning look out of it. For travel, this is nice, but do you see how bulky this is? It's a very bulky, weird, sort of plasticky thing. Like, that lid could have been half the size, but yeah. The Peri Para formula I do really enjoy. So this is, again, not going to be decluttered at all. Because like the look I did with it was really pretty, but it's like one look and that's all you can do with it. Similarly with this one, the Wow in a Box from Catrice. This is their new 5-pan line. It used to be called 5 in a Box. Now they're called Wow in a Box. I'm really expecting them to do like a new one in 2024 of this as well. This is Peach Perfect, and it's Natasha Denona Zendo vibes, like mini Zendo vibes. Especially this shade here on the end is really, really pretty. Really nice quality, but peachy tones are just not my vibe. If I reach for something like this, I'd reach for my mini Zendo, because I do have that one. Another warm tone color story that's just not really quite up my alley, but that I do really enjoy the formula of, which is why I bought it. The Tarte Tartelette Energy palette. This launched this year, and I thought that this could be a nice companion to the Juicy, which I also didn't love because it was so warm toned. Super warm, purpley warm tones, pinky warm tones. It's just very warm. However, some of you have been pointing out to me that Tarte eyeshadow palettes, the later ones, are in fact magnetic. So maybe I should rearrange my Juicy and the Energy palette to keep the shades I love from both of them and sort of like MacGyver my own little Tarte palette here. Because this middle row with the purpley things and like this shade here, those I love. And maybe like this lighter pink and that pink I might like. And then take some of the pinks from the Juicy, put them in here, and they have some cooler tones, and then take all the warm things out of this and put it together with the Juicy and just have two brand new palettes but have it a little bit more rearranged. I think I might like it that better that way because I love the Tartelette formula. It's one of my favorite eyeshadow formulas for sure. Finally in this section, so we're now at like 51 or something like that. This is the Nomad Cosmetics Verona Amore e Morte palette. And this was their Valentine's Day release, and I bought this with my own money. It's a stunning palette. Like, look at this packaging. Look at the shine. It's like a little bit holographic with that like rainbow that comes into it when you hold it up against the light. It has a little doors, which is the only thing I don't really love about the palette packaging wise. Do you see this? It's a bit big. But we have pinks on one side and then these cooler tones on the other side. This is really, really stunning. It's just that I don't really wear pinks and reds all that much. However, it's good to have pinks and reds in your makeup collection, I think. So I'm not going to like get the most use out of this for sure. And if I use it, I'll probably go for like these like purpley. That was my favorite row in the entire palette. So like it for sure. Love the Nomad formula, but color story wise, it wasn't necessarily my favorite. And yes, I keep all of my Nomad palettes in the box because the box is always a little bit differently from the actual palette. It's the only brand I keep the boxes for. And then we get from 50 to 40. So that's the section we're talking about right now. And then we have number 50 is going to be another Gifted to Me palette. And it's the Gemini 2 from Melt Cosmetics. So the Melt formula is another one that I really enjoy. This is just not a palette I would pick up myself. So this was a gift from a friend. Love the greens, but this entire section, this entire section of like mattes that essentially all do the same thing, but they're just a gradient. I really didn't need both of these. Like, they pull the same on my skin tone. We only get 2 shimmers, so that's the reason why I held off of it, because melt can be quite expensive. But yeah, someone was like, hey, I have an extra one. Do you want it? Sure. I'll try it. And I did like the formula, it's just color story-wise, not my favorite. Then we have the other Viseart A12 palette. This is the Viseart San Francisco A12. Again, that gorgeous little skyline right there. And here we have warm tones with a pop of teal. I don't love the orange, but if we think that one away, I really do like this. It's warm tone neutrals, that pop of teal here, a little bit of taupe. So that's why I like this one better than the London one, because if I go warm toned, it's going to be warm tones with a pop of teal. That's like my favorite thing. But I have found another palette this year that does that I like better. Glam Shop, the Very Perry. Stunning palette. It's all periwinkle. They no longer do this. It's discontinued, sadly. A really intense high shimmer. We have some blues here and then some purples. And that's where this goes wrong, because rather than giving me different undertones, I would have much more enjoyed it if it was all like these periwinkle blues with like some darker shades thrown in, because this doesn't have a lot of contrast. So as in terms of a standalone palette, it doesn't really quite work, which is why when I found this on sale, I bought their Fioletti palette, also discontinued, but I just needed to get some deeper things, and I figured these two together might do the trick. So I didn't need this because I have plenty of purples in my makeup collection, but I had to get more use out of this. I do really enjoy the purples in here more than I do these blue tones. And I do have the blue palette from Viseart or from Glam Shop as well. So I can pull in the blue palette to extend the blues, and then I have the purple to extend the purples. Both of these are stunning formula. I do really enjoy it for that, but this is not a standalone palette. Neither is this one. So that's why they're both ranked in this section. And then my first Roman palette. This is the Better Than eyeshadow palette in Peony Nude Garden. Really pretty, but just a little bit too soft for my liking. The reason why this is ranked much higher than the other ones is because this has 2 shimmers, and then this pink also has a bit of a sparkle to it. But essentially it's like a neutral row and then a pinky row. Very soft, very pretty, that very K-beauty wash of color with a bit of sparkle. It's very pretty, but it's also very natural looking, and I want just a little bit more contrast out of my eyeshadow. Just a little bit. Speaking of a palette with very little contrast, the Petals on Point from ColourPop. She's very pretty, and she very much reminded me of the Natasha Denona Retro Glam, because it's also pinks and like very light greens. It's the greens in this palette that are a little bit lacking. These are so light that they even struggle to show up on my complexion. Like, I need to use these with a white base. That's saying something, because I'm fair. I'm very fair skinned. So here we have that. I do really enjoy the pinks. This does have some deeper tones here. You can go full on neutral. And for how limiting this seems, I found that it was incredibly successful in terms of what it gave me. So I did really enjoy it, but it is very limiting. But I do think this is a ColourPop palette that I'm going to keep as is for a little while, because I did really enjoy the way this came together. More Viseart then. This is the Petit Four Lila 2. Tried the original Lilas earlier on, and I do really enjoy it. This one, though, has this peach thing, which I didn't really understand. Like, love these 3 shades, but that random peach. But this works really well together with the Cashmere, together with the Lilas, together with any of the other Viseart palettes I have. So I'm not going to knock it down for that. I love the formula here. Really nice, small little thing for travel as well, if you just want to do a very easy look. That's what I like these Viseart palettes for as well. But this was one that I thought wasn't quite special enough, but still okay. It's one of my favorite Viseart palettes I tried this year. And then a palette that also didn't quite come together for me, even though I love the formula. I love Shroud's formula. This is their Moonfall, launched in 2023, and this one came shattered, like this green shade. So if you can see like little specks of green around these pans, like this one is terrible. That's because that shade had just exploded when it came here. I was able to repress it and salvage it just fine. But yeah, that's what happened to that palette. The issue with this is, as lovely as it is, love the mattes, love the shimmers, but you can do a green look, you can do a blue look, and you can do a purpley cranberry look, and that's it. Because the greens don't go with the purples, the blues don't go with the purples or the greens, so I feel I cannot mix and match this palette the way I'd like it to. Like, if I have a 9-pan, I want all the shades to go together. It doesn't in this one, even though I love the formula and I think it's a stunning, stunning color story. This, to me, again, more of a companion palette. I used this, I think, in August or September. I took all of my, like the Arcana from Shroud, the It's Freaking Bats, and this one, and I sort of used them together, and that worked beautifully. It did really well, especially the cranberries and the greeny golds in here go with the Arcana so well. So I know I can still get the use out of it. It has some really nice intense shimmers. Love it, formula-wise, but the color story doesn't really, like the shades pull a bit weird on me sometimes. If you want to go periwinkle, then the palette that is still available, because the Glam Shop one has been discontinued, but this you can still get as far as I know, the Lavish. A lot of people hated on this, but that's because a lot of people don't have fair skin with a cooler undertone. If you do have fair skin and you have a cooler undertone, and you do like a purple, but most purples look too pink on you, try this, because these are very blue toned. And I just like this a little bit better than the Glam Shop one, because this does come together. It doesn't have too many undertones going on. We do get some like shimmery, like ethereal looking things. That's just something I love. And then this all has that sort of like, almost like a lavender gray leaning shade. Very stunning, liked it a lot. And it's a nice formula from ColourPop. You just have to be incredibly fair-skinned for it to work. And finally in this section, so I think we're now at 41, this is the Nomad Monteverde Cloud Forest palette. And this is why I keep the Nomad boxes, because when I take this palette out, you can no longer see the animals right there, which I think is very ingenious. I won this in a giveaway. One of you nominated me, and then I was a winner. And this is a very colorful, leaning color story with some greens. And I'm currently not really in my colorful era, I should say, but I do really enjoy these. They are really pretty. They're very pretty eyeshadows. I love the Nomad formula. We even get a multi-chrome in here, some gorgeous shimmers in here. And I don't have that many sort of like neon leaning shades. So in terms of like a fun, colorful color story, this is now one of my favorites in my collection, but I don't go for color all that often. If I go for color, I go for blue, greens, and purples and teals. That's like my comfort zone. And this is just a little bit more out there than I normally go for. Now, remember me telling you that we were going to get into like pretty much favorites territory from number 40 onwards. Like all of these I love. Everything that's coming up, great formula, great color story, really, really enjoyed it. But I had to be very strict with myself to determine like what was actually like the best of the best for me this year. So that's why the Zoeva, who remembers that we got these this year, but Zoeva launched these little 4 pans, and the only reason why they're like this part of the ranking, like we're pretty much halfway through now, but this is like the bottom part of that first half of the ranking is because the color stories aren't that exciting. I tried 3 of these, and these are $27.50, which seems like a lot of money for a 4-pan, but let me show you the one that I think looks like drives my point home the most. Doesn't this just look like a Charlotte Tilbury palette? She does. This is very Pillow Talk-esque, and this is more than half the price point of a Dior, Quint, Chanel, those kind of palettes. And the formula in this is that high quality, which is why I feel these are incredibly good and very underrated, and nobody has been talking about them because not a lot of people like these softer things. It's very sort of satin heavy, but you can just see what they were trying to do. You get one matte, then you get like 2 like satins for the everyday look, and then you get something that's a little bit more metallic-y for the more glam moment. It doesn't have the sparkle shade that Charlotte Tilbury gives you, but you can just see where they got the inspiration. And formula-wise, when you touch these shadows blend themselves. It's a stunning, stunning formula. It's just that because it's very satin heavy and because the color stories aren't that exciting, like the 3 I have, I'm good. I don't need any more of these, but the formula of this is something I've never tried, and at this price point, it may seem expensive for 4 pans, but if you buy a Charlotte Tilbury one, you pay twice as much, and you get the same effect. And then the other two I have here are Glorious Golden Eyes, which I liked a lot more than I had expected, because I don't love golds usually, but it's got this like greeny sort of taupe kind of leaning shade. Very interesting. I would mainly go for these two again if I ever use this. This gold I could care less about. And then my favorite one of the 3 is Emerald Green Eyes, again with that gold in there. I just wish that this came with like a slightly different shimmer option here. So if I can depot these, maybe I can take that shade from the Glorious Golden Eyes and exchange it for this. I think that may be pretty. If I can do my hair dryer trick, but these are so soft that I don't think I want to do it, because these are small and dinky and I can put them anywhere. No issues there. It's a very soft formula, so I'm a little stressed out about like trying to prying out with a little tool. I don't think that would go down very well. A palette that I discovered and I liked so much that I was like, right, I want to get more. So if you've seen my haul already, or maybe if my haul goes up next, I don't know yet exactly in what order I will be filming, but I got some more LH Cosmetics. This is the Daybreak, and this is a palette that swatches terribly, but when you use it with brushes, she comes to life. She just... The only thing I didn't love was like the minty blue shade, but this section is really lovely, and then you can do like a more neutrally look. This gray isn't just a gray, it's like a blue-brown gray sort of shifty kind of shade, but like a sophisticated shift. It's like nothing like in your face. Yeah, I really enjoyed this, and I liked it a lot more than I had expected, because a lot of people were like, especially when I first got this in, and for how expensive it is, it's like 45 euros for a 9 pan. I was like, oh, I swatched them and I was like, oh, that's very disappointing, but then I ended up using it and I liked it a lot. A palette that was sent to me in PR by the brand is this palette from What's Up Beauty. This is the Geodes palette, and I decluttered their Desert Storm last year because I didn't love the color story, but this is far more up my alley. We have your like purpley neutrals here, and then this is a little bit more warm toned, some interesting shades, and you might think that yellow isn't going to go with everything. It does, because we get this really pretty yellow tone shimmer as well. This green is like a great cocky shade, so very versatile little palette. For how many pans you get, I really feel they've nailed it with this one. And yeah, I really do enjoy the What's Up Beauty color story, the formula as well. In this section, I also have a couple of my old shimmer palettes. As much as I love shimmers, I do want there to be a blend of mattes and shimmers, because that way I feel like I get more use out of it. But my Lisa Eldridge, look at how beautiful this packaging is. This is the Sorcery palette, and I tried it in December for the first time, and as much as I like it, it only has one matte. Everything else is quite shimmer heavy, so there's only like a couple of looks I can do with it. This is definitely more of a companion palette for me with one of the other Lisa Eldridge palettes I tried this year. I think I can just get so much more use out of it that way. You can buy these shades individually. You don't have to buy the whole palette. Just get the one shade you like from, if you like this color story. That would be my recommendation. And this one, the ColourPop Pretty Please. I like this so much more than I had expected, and so many of you recommended this to me. I think this may be my new, like, mauve tone leaning color story from ColourPop that I like. Do I still need the ones I already have? Not sure. We'll see how it goes when I declutter. Something a bit more cool toned. This is a bit more warm toned and a bit more neutral leaning. You get some super shock things in here, but it's really pretty. I really enjoyed this. This worked really well for me. It goes perfectly with my skin tone. If I want to go for that more like everyday look, this was stunning. Greatly appreciate this one, so thank you for the recommendations. Another palette I tried this year for the first time, and a brand I had not tried before, is Wycon. This is their Glam Eyes Coolest Shades eyeshadow palette, and she is a beaut. It's such a stunning palette. When I filmed this video for the first time, I actually wore this palette on my eyes, but oh well. The only thing it's lacking is actual midtones to set up a crease. The only crease shade we get is this. This blue is too light, this green is too light. We get two peachy tones. If this or that peach was a slightly different shade, I would have liked it better. Like, A slightly darker brown would have really helped this palette come together as a whole. But the shimmer formula in this, thing is out of this world amazing. So this entire middle row, love it. That shade is really stunning. These blues are really stunning. Really like these two like toppery things that we get in here as well. Yeah, this is a very, very stunning palette. I wanted a little bit more from it, especially for how expensive it is. I got this on a deal for around 35 euros, but the full price on it is 50. And I just know that I wouldn't like this as much if I had paid 50 euros for it. Because they sort of charge Huda Beauty-esque kind of price points, but I didn't feel that the mattes in this especially warranted that sort of price point, you could say. So that's why it's up here. Then we have the Dancing in the Sky from Gloss Gods. This is their All Shimmer Effects palette. I now also have the blue tone one in Color of Rain, which I will be testing out for you in January. Yeah, she's just beautiful. So many different textures. Even though this is an All Shimmer green palette, when I used it, I did only use this and I didn't use any mattes with it. And it worked really well. I have to say, it did work really well. And I'm just a bit of a magpie for this. But similarly to the Lisa Eldridge, if I ever go back to it, it's gonna need something else for it to work with. And I definitely think that other Gloss Gods palettes, and of course other eyeshadow I already have, is going to work with this perfectly. Or if you don't have the shadow, just use a bronzer in the crease and then something like this. I'm sure it can work, but again, because it's all shimmer, it's a bit limiting. And then we're rounding up the 40 to 31 places with my Sydney Grace Heaven on Earth palette. This is stunning. Again, like the Sweet Indulgence, I really enjoy the Sydney Grace formula. Color story-wise, this was a little less perfect for me than I had expected upon seeing this swatched and being announced online. We have blues, we have greens, and we have warmer toned neutrals. Sydney Grace is a brand that does light and deep versions of all the palettes they do, which I greatly appreciate. But I wished that they wouldn't only do light and deep, but also cool and warm. Because if this top row had been a little bit cooler toned, I would have been able to pull it into the blues and the greens far more perfectly than I do now. So now I kind of like ignore the entire top row. And these two blues I found a little bit too bright on my coloring. Like on my fair skin, this turned into sky blue and I was like, whoa. Whereas these two are quite dark. So the gap between the lighter blues and the darker blues is a bit big. It's a bit stark. So I love the greens in here. I like some of these neutrals. I like some of these blues. But the way it sort of comes together for me wasn't as perfect as I had hoped. I do like these shades individually. Again, Sydney Grace has magnetic pans, so I could pull this apart and just keep the shades I like. But maybe I fuse this together with another Sydney Grace palette that I'm about to show you. Not sure, but I do really like the turtle on the front here, and I don't really need this palette to be rearranged just yet. I could just pull something else in. Moving into the top 30 then. On the number 30 spot, I have my final Viseart palette from the year. I tried a couple of Viseart things this year, and I liked them, as you can see, but they weren't ultimate favorites this year because the color stories just weren't necessarily my vibe. And the one I'm ranking the highest, because it's the more special thing they've ever done, is the Violetta. This is another Petit Four, and they launched this at the end of 2022. And this is just a little bit more special for what Viseart usually does. It's very grungy for their taste, but this again, together with the Kashmiri, those new Viseart palettes, and then this with the Charmeuse, I think will be really pretty. I think it's very pretty. But it's a bit like too out there almost. Like it's not something I'm going to get like daily use out of, which is why it's ranked here. Number 29, the Smoky Glam from Bella Beauty Bar. I reviewed this in, I think, November, and the main reason why it's here is because she's just too big. There's too many shades here that I could have done without, too much overlapping things that just look the same on my lids, and not enough shimmers. That's why I want more shimmers. And I know a lot of people love the Bella Beauty Bar formula, and it's like their perfect palette and all that. But for how expensive this is, I mean, just the palette itself is like 80 euros. Just the palette. No shipping, no handling fees. And then if I look at the quality of the shimmers we get in here, there aren't that many. Out of a 36 pan eyeshadow palette, there's only 11 shimmers. That's not even a third of the palette. And it's the shimmers that make the palette expensive, in case you were wondering. Like if you have very special formulas, it's usually the shimmers that make things expensive. Here's why I'm not ranking the Bella Beauty Bar Smoky Glam any higher, is because I have found other indie palette, like other indie brand shadows that are cheaper than this, that don't do these super large palettes that just gives me so many superfluous mattes that I didn't need. Like if this was half the size with the same amount of shimmers, I would have liked this about like, then this would have been top 10. Because I do really like the formula. It's just too big, not enough shimmers for my taste, and it's expensive for what it is. So if I can get other indie brands that are half or maybe even less than that, like I think a quarter of the price point of this, that's going to give me a same effect on the eyes, I'm going to pick the cheaper options. Not going to lie. I'm going to pick the cheaper options over this. Do I appreciate this? Am I now happy that I got to try Bella Beauty Bar? Will I go back to this? Do I think it's stunning? Do I think it's a great, like if you don't have a single cool tone in your entire makeup collection and you want to get started and you want it to not only be grays, then like, because the only thing that's gray here is the bottom row, and that's still quite taupe leaning. Like the only grays really is like this section here. These are taupes. Here you get some more green leaning taupes. Then we move into like mauve things over here with these like purpley things. And then we get some pinks. There's like 3 peach shades in here. And that's it. Like it gets a little warm tone and weird up here, I feel. And then like something like this brighter thing and this thing is a little too warm tone. Those are the only ones that don't make sense to me. But for the most part, she's just a really beautiful, well-rounded, great for everyday palette. If you want to get into indie eyeshadows and you just want one and you want it to be cool toned, this is a great one-stop shop. But I'm ranking 86 palettes today. Did I need this? No. I've got plenty and I want a little bit, like variety is the spice of life. So that's why I feel like it's just a little bit expensive for what it is. But I did really love it. Speaking of a cool tone color story that I think is just perfect, but again, can be a little bit difficult to get. I'm not sure if they still do this, but the ColourPop Troublemaker. I bought this at the end of 2022 after having so many mishaps, a little bit with Odin's Eye this year. In previous years, I had a lot of mishaps with ColourPop. And this is the palette I tried earlier this year, and I was like, oh, ColourPop can still do good eyeshadow. And then everything I've tried since then has been lovely. So ColourPop has found its mojo back for me for sure. Nice grungy color story, a little bit of warmth, but nothing too warm, some special shades, some shifty things, some really pretty, stunning mattes in here, and quite a few shimmers. So liking that one. This next section may actually come as a bit as a surprise as well, because in, I think it's now 27, in the 27 spot, Pat McGrath, Moonlit Seduction. I had predicted that this was going to be one of my favorite palettes of this year, but I've just tried so many other things, and I'm like, Pat McGrath, for how expensive it is, I'm just sort of over what the brand has to offer, you could say. So as much as I still like this mothership, I kept this over the Vine Rose one. So I love this palette. I really, really do. But I'm just not sure I find it worth it anymore. Like, she's very pretty. I really enjoy this palette. It has some stunning shades. Like, these 5 shimmers are just life. I really enjoy this purpley thing, this taupey, darker taupey thing. This peach, but it's like a rosy peach. It works really well. The bronze in here worked for me. Even the champagne. It's just that if you have a couple of these Pat McGrath palettes, like, you really don't need all of them. Grab the ones you like, and then you're good to go. Still really enjoy the formula, though. And I felt similarly about my Natasha Denona palette I tried this year. This is the Retro Glam, which we all know, if you've been with me this year, no longer looks like the original color story, because I reorganized all of my Natasha Denona color stories. Because 2023 is the year where I realized, as much as I love the Natasha Denona formula, like Viseart, one of my favorite formulas, one of my favorite eyeshadow formulas. But her color stories just aren't it. They're just not it for me. So as much as I enjoy the formula, I had to rearrange all of them. So this is what I turned my retro glam into. And then I had the original glam, the original retro, and the My Dream. And then I think I turned the retro into like the pinky purpley one. And then I did the glam and the My Dream. That's where all the warm tones went. But I did go back to these. I tried them all again. And this is my favorite color story now that I have from Natasha Denona. It's got all the cool tones and then a bit of the greens from the original retro glam. Then here in the mid-20s, we have the other Sydney Grace palette. This was gifted to me by a friend. I did not order this, but she was like, I think you might like this. And she had an extra one. And she was like, you could try it. And I was like, I didn't need another neutral palette, which is why I didn't get it. But that bottom row, that cool tone row here, so perfect. This is nicely neutral, and then this is pretty warm toned. The only two shades I didn't love in here are these orange leaning things. This is why I want Sydney Grace to do not only light and dark, but also cool toned and warm toned, because if this had been more cool toned, I would have liked it even more. Again, great Sydney Grace formula. I just wish they would do something differently with their shimmers. So for them, it's like satin shimmers. Like they are shimmers, but they're not like metallic high shine. They have a bit more of a sophisticated blend to them. And then you get mattes. So you only get two formulas, two textures in every palette. So either more palettes, like either more texture or a little bit more variation in the undertones. That would greatly help me to appreciate these even more. And the most successful ColourPop palette for me this year is this really nice neutral thing. This is the Deja Brew. I found this on TikTok. I saw Melissa Murdoch, who is a makeup artist, using this a couple of times. And I was like, ooh, that looks like a lighter version of the That's Taupe. And I love my That's Taupe. So I'm thinking maybe that I can take these shades out and combine them with my That's Taupe later on, because I especially like the shimmers that we get in here. We get 6 mattes. Maybe I didn't need all of the mattes, but this is really pretty. This is sort of like, in my brain, like That's Taupe and then Going Coconuts, and you combine those two, you get this palette. That's how it feels in my brain. Another palette I fell in love with at the start of the year, and they brought it back at the end of 2023. So I'm not sure if it's still around, but I'll have a look to see if I can find it. I'll make sure to have a link in the description box where you can shop all of these if you'd like to. If I put all the links in, my description box would fill up too quickly. So there's going to be one link at the top of the description box where you can just click that and you can shop all of these eyeshadow palettes in one go if you'd like to. But yeah, if I can find it, I will add the link to the exact palette this is. This is the Celestial Winter from e.l.f. And I fell in love. I hadn't tried an e.l.f. eyeshadow palette in a while. The bite-sized one that so many people raved about, I thought were okay. They were nice enough for the price point. But this blew my socks off. It was just so pretty. We do get something that's more warm-toned here, but this brown is pretty neutral. We get enough light shades. And where in the Catrice palette, these like lighter pastel-y things didn't really do much, these work. We get a really nice like flippy shade in here. It's like a purple, blue, pink sort of thing. We get a really nice vibrant blue. I thought that wasn't going to show up, but it worked really well. So I love this little thing, and I was really glad to see that they brought it back at the end of 2023. Another palette that I just loved is the Fighter palette from Fantasy Cosmetica, but there was another Fantasy Cosmetica palette I just liked a little bit better, so that's in the top 20. This one is still in the top 25. This is the Fighter. We have neutrals, like cooler tone neutrals. We have warmer tone neutrals, and then some things to tie it all together, because believe it or not, this mustard brings the entire palette together. It just really, really does. And where I feel the Fantasy Cosmetica and Shroud formulas are quite similar. Like they feel very similar to me. So it's a formula I love. They do some really cool shimmers in here. And this is like, in terms of like an amped up neutral palette, this is really good. I really like it. I did buy the Warlock. So I'm going to be trying that very, very soon for you. But I have heard that the Warlock is the first time where Fantasy Cosmetica has kind of like slipped for a lot of people, but I do really like the Fighter, so let's stick to the things I have already tried, and the Fighter reaffirmed, like confirmed for me why I love Fantasy Cosmetica so much. And finally, number 21, Nice Weeds from Glam Shop. I think they still do this, if I'm not mistaken. You can still buy this, or maybe it's sold out again. I don't know. With Glam Shop, you just never know. And we had this like spell in the middle part of 2023 where every brand seemed to do a warm tone neutral, like yellows with a pop of green. A lot of people were going for the Yucca by Natasha Denona. I got this Glam Shop one. This was only 21 euros. I get all the greens I like. I get a couple of these like warmer mustardy leaning things that go really well with the greens. The Yucca for me, not enough shimmers, not enough greens. There's only like 3 greens in the entire palette. So, and for a lot of people, that's actually their favorite palette of the year. Yeah, I just really like it. We only get 3 mattes and everything else has a shimmer. So this was right up my street. And the greens in here pull a little bit gray. Loved it. And now it's time for the top 20. And we're kicking off the top 20 with a palette that when I did my mid-year ranking, I thought was going to be one of my like top 10 favorites. But I had tried just so many more things I loved in the second half of the year that the cashmere still makes it into the top 20, but it's now ranked here. So the cashmere from Glam Shop, again, sadly it has been discontinued, but such a great like soft neutral palette. It is a little bit light leaning and I didn't really need the peach. Could have done without the peach. But everything else in here is really, really stunning. And in terms of like an indie brand that I think does really good eyeshadow and that doesn't make you pay 80 euros because they have special shimmers, check out Glam Shop. Because this is a bit bigger. So this is 15 pans. So this was 30 or 35 euros. Like even if you'd have to pay for shipping and handling to the US and you'd have to pay twice as much, it would still be cheaper than getting a Bella Beauté bar palette. And you're still getting very special shimmers. So there's that. Number 19. I had to put it somewhere. Again, this was very high up my mid-year ranking, the Smoke and Mirrors from Gloss Gods. But at that moment, I was still hoping that they would bring this back for Christmas as another limited edition, but they didn't. They didn't. So that's why I'm ranking it here, because you can no longer buy this, but you can just see why I love this, I hope. Some really nice like gray tones, but nice grays, good grays. These like heather purple leaning shades, love them. There's a bit of warmth, but it's actually quite neutral and therefore a really great cool tone color story. I'm so glad I caved because I wasn't going to get this because I had only just discovered Gloss Gods when this launched and I hadn't tried the original 2 palettes I had purchased from them. And I was like, am I going to risk it? What if I don't like it? These look pretty in a swatch, but what if I use it with brushes and I end up hating it? That was my theory. And then I was like, oh, but this color story just looks so perfect. I can't say no to this. So I decided to buy it. They had a 25% off deal that day as well. And I just caved. And I'm so glad I did because this Gloss Gods is like my new, like, it indie brand. Gloss Gods, Glam Shop, Fantasy Cosmetica. Those are like my top 3 favorite indie brands of the moment. And this, like, they just can't do no wrong. They can do no wrong in my book. Next up, number 18, is the Kaleidos Almaviva in Twilight Rush. This is the more purpley one of the 2. It's purples. And this is a little bit more limiting, I feel, than the other one that I will be showing you in a minute. You do get 2 shimmers in here, but this is a bit more of a satin. Love that. My favorite shade, though, is this gray, murky purple thing. Stunning. I love the Kaleidos formula. So many people were saying how they didn't like Kaleidos, that they feel they're slipping, that they're not doing interesting things. But if you're not in tune with what Asian beauty has to offer, and I feel that Kaleidos is a brand that does Asian makeup for the Western market. I've said it a couple of times now, but that's what I feel they're up to. So if you don't like that wash of color with a sparkle on top, you're not going to like these, but I feel that because they try to cater to a more westernized market, there is more pigment in these shadows that you get from traditional K-beauty, J-beauty brands. And then, I'm trying it out, you guys, because I do really love these. Numbers 17 and 16 are going to be my 2 MUA eyeshadow palettes. These were honorable mentions in my best of the year eyeshadows, and I just like them. I'm wearing the Enchantment, so let me show you that one first. I've used this in the crease, used this in the outer V, this all over the lid, this on the lower lash line and a bit as liner, and this is in the inner corner. And I put on a bit of glitter primer to see if this would hold up with a glitter primer, because as pretty as these swatch, my eyelids ate these shimmers. They just disappeared. It wasn't even in the crease. It was just after 2-3 hours of wear, the shimmer was just nowhere to be found. And I was like, I don't have oily lids. I always double prime. What's going on with these? But because these are so affordable, like these are $3.99 in the UK drugstore. Like, they are super affordable. And some of you have told me, like, I feel they are even better than a Tasha Denona 5 pans. And for the price point, you cannot fault them. Is the packaging cheap? Yes. Are the mattes stunning? Yes. Are these shimmers incredibly impactful and super stunning, even applied on the lids? And can I apply them with brushes and blend them out? Yes, yes, double yes. It ticks all of the boxes. The only thing I had to make sure is that these last on my lids with something like glitter primer. So that's what I've done today. So I'll update you, because by the time I'm editing this video, I will know how this wore throughout the day. And I will make sure to have a little bit of a text up on the screen to let you know whether there was any disappearing of the eyeshadows. And then the way to make them work was just to add the glitter primer, which I'm not mad about, especially this price point. Of the two, the Andromeda Skies is the one I preferred because it's a little bit deeper. This shimmer is life. It's just really stunning. And as deep as this looks, these sheer out beautifully. So they turn out a little bit lighter, at least on my skin tone they did, than what they look like in the pan. So the Andromeda Skies is a little bit more smoky. The Enchantment is like perfect for every day, but combined they work really well as well. They also have this as a 15 pan sort of palette as well, so that's what I want to try next. I think there are no other cooler toned color stories in this lineup. I think everything else is warm toned, but part of me wants to get all of these because they're so cheap and it's such great quality eyeshadow. It just is. And I've been filming for more than an hour and this still looks pretty good to me. So high hopes that a bit of glitter primer is getting the job done to get these to stick to my lids. And we're getting into the top 15. Number 15 is going to be this guy. Remember what I said when I showed you the Viseart San Francisco Étoile, that there was going to be another warm-toned neutral color story with a pop of teal? It's the Welcome to Cape Town from Essence. This thing is under 10 euros and it blew my socks off. I was so impressed with this. As much as I've disliked some of these color stories in the past, Essence just knocked it out of the park. We have some warm tones here. We have these cooler tone things with some greens and teals. Everything works together. You can do like warm tone neutrals with a pop of teal. You can do cool tone neutrals with a pop of teal. You can do the greens with the teal. You can do the neutrals with the greens. You can just do a full-on neutral look. If you pull this peach in with a little bit of this orange tone and then the deeper brown here, you get a very nice, good neutral look. And this yellow tone gold, I don't love yellow tone gold, you guys. I don't. It's my least favorite shade in every palette. But this one, if you want to go for the full glam, you can go full glam. And it just has everything you can possibly need. I just didn't run out of ideas when I was using this. And for how much this is and what it ends up doing, I thought she was pretty. K-Beauty, number 14, the Over the Path from Clio. And this is what I want all K-Beauty brands to do from now on. This is a little bit more contrasting because we get some depth. We have some more interesting shimmers in here as well. There's still that sparkly glitter thing as well that K-Beauty brands just like to do, but we also get the wash of color. This just has options. It has so many options, and I love this mauve tone color story. It's just really pretty. There's also a warm tone version of this. They came out with 2 of them at the same time. I think they were like fall releases at the end of 2022, and I'm so glad I got to try it. I already knew from last year that I liked the Clio formula, but to now have it in a color story that I also enjoy, chef's kiss. Next up, 5 in a Box from Catrice, the Diamond Lavender look. This was number 1 in my mid-year ranking, and this fell down because I've just tried another gray and purple color story that I like a little bit better. But this, I was able to pull 5 different looks out of this. This little 5 pan, 5 different looks. If you're not fair skinned, if you don't have a cool undertone, you're not gonna like it. Because it's very light. It's discontinued already as well, which is why, again, I had to not put it in the top 10, I feel. Great crease shade, you get enough here, you get some depth to smoke things out, but it's so soft and blendable and easy to work with. Thank you, Catrice. Etude Autumn Closet. If we're talking perfect neutral tone palettes I tried this year, it's this one. This is a little green leaning, this is a little bit more neutral, and then here we get some cooler tones. It does everything you want it to do. This shimmer is life. They have rearranged this though. This still is around, but it's now a 9-pan. It's like a square packaging, and I think this is, oh, it's 10. So I think you now get one shade less. So that may be a bit of a shame, but yeah, I do really enjoy this one. And then the number 11 spot goes to the Cool Nude Edition from Essence. Another Essence palette that just knocked it out of the park for me. This, I mean, it's so pretty. It's so pretty, and this is also being discontinued. I do apologize, but yeah, this like taupey gray leaning thing, we get a silver. These things pull pink on me. It's got enough things to smoke things out with, and then you just have your like lighter champagne shade for the inner corner, some things to blend it out. So this peach with this burgundy shade, or this lighter shade with the gray, really makes this a bit more versatile and workable if you want to win this. Because this palette is in a giveaway, because I'm currently celebrating making it to 10K, and the giveaway is still open until the 15th of January. So make sure to leave a link in the description box down below. If you haven't entered yet, you can still do that. Are you ready for the top 10? Number 10, What's Up Beauty Dragon Eye. This palette was sent to me in PR, and it's the first time a brand ever sent me anything ahead of launch, which I was so honored to be a part of. But I also genuinely enjoy this palette. It has the purpley things here, again, the warmer tone things, and these are all multi-chromes. All the shimmers are multi-chromes, and these are the kind of multi-chromes that I wish more indie brands did, because they do have a flip. They definitely have a very visible flip, but there's a level of sophistication to it. And I think that that's why I enjoy this palette so much, because I find a lot of multi-chromes, as stunning as they are in a full-on swatch, I sometimes find that when I put them on my lids, I don't get the same effect. But because these already have that sort of blendable quality to them, I feel they work a lot better for me. It's like multi-chromes you can wear on a regular workday, and nobody will go like, is your eyeshadow doing a weird thing? You know, it's like people who don't know makeup will not be surprised if you're wearing this. It just looks really pretty, really sparkly, and incredibly stunning on the lids. And it also has mattes. It has 5 mattes, everything else is shimmer. What's Up Beauty just really knocked it out of the park with this one. Number 9, the Kaleidos Alma Viva Venus Trap. This is the other Kaleidos palette that I tried this year, and this is the one I like the best. It's just these really nice cool tone neutrals and this really nice high shine shimmer eyeshadow. It just couldn't get any better than this. So this is really stunning. I love the packaging on these as well, like this fabric. It's a little bit squishy. You have the Kaleidos symbol. It's just, it feels so rich and luxurious. You get the wash of color, but you can't amp this up. And I have said this a lot of times, if you have a couple of these Kaleidos quads, you can mix and match them really nicely. This will work together so well with the cold brew. I just know it. And next up, number 8. Remember what I said about having found a purple and gray palette I like a little bit better compared to the Catrice? That's this one. This is the Dior Backstage Silver Essentials palette. It's expensive, but it's so, so worth it, I find. You can still do a full-on purple look with this because you have this to sort of put in the crease. And then you have this full row of grays that you can pull in if you want to do something a bit more smoky, dramatic. You have the darker matte, so it has enough contrast. But if you leave this out, like look at that. Like these like pinky tones with some of these lighter grays. Such a great look for every day. It's such a versatile palette. I always say how I don't like it when brands do cool tone palettes and it just seems that all they can do is a gray. But it only has 3 grays. 6 of these shades are pinks and purples. And even this like white thing, It's just really pretty as an inner corner highlight. You do have to like satins if you want to get this. Like, if you don't like satin shimmer formula, if you don't like that kind of formula, stay away, because this is not going to be impactful metallic eyeshadow. But I did a look where I used all 9 shades and I loved it. It just, and the blendability on this. I mean, I say this all the time. I sound like a broken record by now, but blendability, buildability, like buildable, blendable eyeshadows, I'd much rather have than incredible pigment or high shine shimmers. Because I can get those from like liquid and creams. I don't need an eyeshadow palette to be this like intense, like indie brand standard that everybody seems to love online. I just want palettes that have a little bit more sophistication to them. And that's what's actually a lot in this top 10. So let me move on to the next palette. This is the Glossier Mist Monochrome. Bought it in London, fell in love. It's got a matte, a satin, and a metallic. And it's this really pretty mauve color story. What else can I say? In terms of like an eyeshadow palette that does that buildable, blendable thing that I love so much, this is another one that really does that. I mean, all of these that are in this top 10 have this like blendable, buildable quality in color stories I love. From the What's Up Beauty to the Kaleidos, the Dior, and everything I'm still going to be talking about right now. It's just, there's just something about those formulas that I really, really enjoy, and I just like it so much better than full-on pigment. Because then, you know, you need to place the eyeshadow and then blend it if it's full-on pigment. And I just don't have the lid space to do that. So I need my eyeshadow to blend the minute I touch a brush to my lids. I just do. Next up, I think this is number 6. My Victoria Beckham Beauty Smoky Eye Brick in the shade Tuxedo. This was sent to me in PR, but if you see my haul, then you know that I fell in love with this brand in 2023 and I wanted to get some more. So I actually bought another one of these. Because this is a bit boring, but again, the formula on this thing makes it so worth it. You wouldn't believe it. So we have this taupe, which obviously is my favorite shade. This thing to blend things out with. We have something to line the lids with, and then we have this cream. Together with one of the lid lusters from this brand, the eyeliners from this brand. It's so pretty. So pretty, so pretty, so sophisticated. I would not recommend you travel with this because this thing is one giant pan. If this ever cracks, you're going to be in for a very messy repressing, and you're only going to get one shade of eyeshadow if that happens. So wouldn't travel with it. Please be careful, but it just such an easy eye look and so effortless, and I just love that about that eyeshadow palette. Then number 5, the Romand Better Than palette in Dreamy Lilac Garden. Who'd have thought when I tried this for the first time that this was going to end up this high? We have these 2 shimmers here and a really nice gradient. This is very similar to the Clio Over the Path, where we get enough depth. The bottom row is a little bit more warm tone leaning, and then we have these like mauve shades. Another thing that I've loved so much that I decided to get some more of these because I just love the formula of the Romand Better Than palettes so much. And this is just, again, very sophisticated, very pretty on, but this has the depth where it's still very great for every day, but you do get a little bit more versatility about it, out of it than some of the other K-beauty brands that I ranked a lot lower. Number 4, Lisa Eldridge's Vega. Of course. Same, like similar thing to the Victoria Beckham and the Dior and everything I've been raving about. Beautifully blendable eyeshadows. And this is ranked higher than the Victoria Beckham because this does have shimmers. It's got 3 and it has textures at that. Because this is a topper shade. This is a really nice shimmer. This is a really nice shimmer. You get a taupe, you get a blue, so something to play with and something to use as a liner. So even though this is only 6 pans, you can really nicely mix and match. And I already showed you the sorcery. Do you see the vision? Do you see the vision? Because that teal that it has will go perfectly with these taupes. And some of those greener and golden tone shimmers will just amp this up and take it to another level. Myth from Lisa Eldridge is still very much on the wish list, but it's been out of stock for a while. But that will be a 2024 purchase for sure. And then we have number 3, top 3 time, people. The Rogue from Fantasy Cosmetica. This thing is so, so pretty. I mentioned I had another Fantasy Cosmetica palette in here, and this is the one. 4 shimmers, 5 mattes, and this all goes together. It's blue, greens, and purples, which is my favorite colorful color story in a formula I love. Yeah, and if these things are too dark, this middle shade can just blend out everything. It works perfectly. And you can deepen things up because these shimmers really transform if you put them over a black as well. Such a great palette to just play with. If you've never tried Fantasy Cosmetica, you want to try just one of their palettes, make it this one. And then number 2, the Simna Mocha from Glam Shop. This is like the mini version of the Cashmere. It's been discontinued, sadly, but it's just these really soft tones. I really enjoyed it. This shimmer is just heaven. This is a duochrome. Do you see that it has that blue flip? Love that. This is another great taupe shimmer. Like, this is just taupe heaven. The only thing, like, these 2 shades are perhaps a bit similar, but I don't really mind it that much. You have a gray, you have this white to blend things out with if you like, and you have something that's deep enough that isn't a black to add as liner or deepen up shades. And this, it's not quite a silver and it's not quite a taupe, and yet it's both at the same time. And this, like both of these, like it looks like a boring gray, but it has a bit of a lavender, lilac sort of quality to it. A bit of purple running through it, which is why I love that one as well. And finally, number 1, the new neutrals from Gloss Gods. I told you there were 3 indie brands I love that aren't super expensive, that just knock all of the more expensive ones out of the park for me. Gloss Gods, Glam Shop, and Fantasy Cosmetica, and they make up my top 3 as well. This is the new neutrals. The reason why this gets ranked the highest is because this is one you could potentially still buy. It is currently out of stock, but they did say that they will be restocking this early 2024. So I hope it's back in like February time. But here we get like cooler tone neutrals, warmer tone neutrals, and true neutrals. And then, I'm not sure if you can see, but do you see that this has a green flip? And the same with the other shimmer here. It has a green flip to it. This one is super special because you have a bit of purple running through it as well. This is a bit more green leaning. This is like the best cool tone brown ever. It's like a coffee brown. And as warm toned as it looks, on me, these reddish tones actually pull a little bit pink. So for me, it was just perfect. And because these have some green undertones to them, I know this will pair perfectly with that Dancing in the Sky palette, the old shimmer one, the green one. So yeah, this is just a beautiful, beautiful palette. Love the mattes. You get more shimmers than mattes in here, and these retail for around 40 euros a pop. And if you're in the EU, both Glam Shop as well as this are quite easy to get. Fantasy Cosmetica, if you're in the EU, keep an eye out for Monolith and what they have on offer, because they do stock Fantasy Cosmetica on there, and it's not marked up all that much, which I'm super stoked about as well. So that's it. Those are all of the eyeshadow palettes I tried in 2023. This was a long one, I know. I hope it wasn't too rambly, but I really hope you were here for it and that you enjoy eyeshadow palettes as much as I do. I think that's one of the loves that connects us on this channel, is our love for eyeshadow palettes. But you can see I'm very much going into like the smaller, dinkier sort of direction, and not these large, big palettes that do everything. And I'm really enjoying a bit of sophistication in my shadows as well. So that's where the preferences come from. I really hope you enjoyed watching today's video. Thumbs up the video if you liked it. Subscribe to the channel if you'd like to see more by me. Because it's the new year, I will be kicking off some new series in the month as well. So stay tuned for lots of new content, and I hope to see you in my next video. Bye-bye!